hear me now? Is that okay? Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us this morning and waking up with United Way. I'm Efrat Pfefferman, the Executive Director of United Way of Monroe County, and this marks the launch of our 2020 Wake Up with United Way season. We piloted this last year with many of you here, and we just so appreciated the good feedback and encouragement to keep going. There's obviously a lot of topics in our community worthy of discussion and a lot of expertise that we can highlight through this series to stimulate that discussion. So thank you for being here. United Way, through partnerships with 24 member agencies and many other collaborative initiatives, works to make sure that in our community we have a strong safety net and opportunities for families and individuals that need them. We're delighted on behalf of our board president, Kirsten Grunberg, who's here today, and the rest of our board of directors, to also partner on this series with IU's PACE, Political and Civic Engagement Program. Mark Fraley, who will be our moderator today, is here from there. And delighted to have the support of the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce for this season as well. And we've got Mary Morgan and Stacy Bruce from the Chamber here today, so we are so grateful for both of those groups' support. Let's give them a big round of applause. I also want to make sure to thank Bloomington Bagel Company who catered. Give us some feedback on that. We're trying. Good to hear, thank you. It looked pretty, so I'll look forward to testing it too. And the Mill for being a great host for this and donating this space every month. We are so grateful for Pat East and Allison Zook who helped with this. So we'll give them a big round of applause too. Before I bring up our moderator and our panel, just a couple of other notes. Up in the back there, we put an area for you to sort of reflect on. So at any point this morning or when you're finished here and just kind of mingling still, if you want to write any thoughts, there's markers, and we just, appreciate kind of seeing what's milling around in your minds on this topic. We will also be sure to send you out with some resource sheets on how to contact your elected officials and engage deeper on this topic and others, because this is kind of part of it, right? Advocacy can be defined as simply as just raising awareness of an issue, but if you want to take it to the next step and you want to share your thoughts on a topic with your elected officials, those are who can make some meaningful legislative changes in areas that need them. So we hope that this empowers you to feel comfortable doing that. And speaking of our elected officials, we have several here today, and we're so grateful for y'all for being here because, again, you can help make a difference on things, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level. And I just want to acknowledge that from our Monroe County Council, Trent Deckard and Jeff McKim, former County Commissioner Iris Kiesling, from the township level, Bloomington Township Trustee Kim Alexander's here, Judge Catherine Stafford, thank you for being here, and from our MCCSC School Board, one of our speakers, Brandon Schurr, as well as Kathy Fuentes-Rohr. So I hope I didn't miss anyone. Did I miss anyone? Okay, thank you all for being here. We so appreciate all that you do for our community. And again, appreciate all of you being here this morning. So with that, I'm going to bring up Mark Fraley to introduce our panel. Mark is our partner from IU PACE, so come on up, Mark.
All right. We were actually all just comfortable sitting there over at the chairs. We were actually just kind of thinking that maybe we should have that sort of set up, bring the couches up there, bring some fake fruit to put in front of it, and just have this kind of nice, cozy looking environment. So why don't you guys come on up? You can, we didn't bring the smoke machine, so I don't necessarily have the big booming intro just to do it with everyone. But we're putting that in the budget, and we'll make sure to have much more of kind of a light show with presents. I haven't run all this by FROT, so but National has to agree to it because I've already said it in public. So I am just gonna. So with us today we have Julio Alonso from the Hoosier Hills Food Bank. We have Vicki Pierce from the Community Kitchen, and Brandon Schurr, who is with the IU Division of Student Affairs and is also on the local school board. So I am going to give everybody the chance. I've said their names, but I'm going to give everybody a chance to be able to more formally introduce themselves and what they do here in Bloomington and some of their relationship to the issue at hand. So I'll start over here with Julia.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for coming out early this morning to hear about and discuss a topic that's very near and dear to all of our hearts, I know. It's heartwarming to see that. I see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd, so I think many of you are probably already familiar with what we do. But just really quickly, I am Executive Director of Hoosier Hills Food Bank. We've been around since 1982. We're a little bit different in that we're more of a regional agency. We serve a 6-county region, including Monroe County. A little more than half of our activity actually happens here in Monroe County, but we do serve Brown, Lawrence, Orange, and Owen counties as well, and Martin County. Our primary purpose is to rescue food that might otherwise be wasted and get it out to agencies that are serving people in need. And we do that to the tune of about 5 million pounds of food a year. Last year was a milestone for us. We hit 5 million pounds for the first time in our 38-year history. So that was a pretty big deal for us. Do that through a network of partner agencies, not quite 100 of them in those 6 counties that include my 2 colleagues here, and run the gamut from food pantries and kitchens to shelters, youth programs, area agencies on aging, and all sorts of other agencies that are working with people in need. And we try to provide the food component to them as much as possible. We have a couple of direct service programs as well. We do a senior food box program in all 6 of our counties to serve about 1,000 seniors each month with a box of food. And we have a mobile pantry program that operates in 4 of our communities where we'll go out and directly distribute that food to individuals in partnerships with other locations. Do a lot more. I could talk forever on that, if you want to learn more, though, I'll invite you all here to our annual meeting next month, Friday, March 13th at the Food Bank. If you're interested in coming, just email me at julio@hhfoodbank.org, and we'd love to have you there. Got some exciting announcements about what we did last year and what we've got coming up.
All right, good morning. I am Vicki Pierce. Oh, I forgot you guys were over here. Sorry. I've been staring right here. Vicki Pierce, I'm the Director of Community Kitchen. You beat us by a year, right? Because we started in 1983. We are the largest provider of free meals in the community. So we are a partner agency of the Hoosier Hills Food Bank, and a lot of the food that we use in our programs comes from there. In addition, we get other food donations, and we purchase food for a lot of our programs. We are what most people think of traditionally as a soup kitchen, where folks can come and eat 6 days a week during dinner from 4 to 6 p.m. with no questions asked. But that really ends up being a real small part of what we do. It's about 35% of what we do. About 65% of what we're doing is taking food out into the community, the people where they already are, trying to reach the most vulnerable citizens, the citizens most vulnerable to food insecurity, and try to get them access to nutrition where the places they're already going to be. So we work with after-school programs, like the Boys and Girls Club, to get food to children in those programs. We work with the school system through our Backpack Buddies program to get weekend food home with children and their families. In the summer when school is out, we deliver lunches to 10 low-income neighborhoods in the county, again, reaching out to kids. We have home delivery programs for low-income homebound seniors, as well as low-income folks who are HIV positive and are dealing with health issues related to their situation as well. We provide food to Friends Place, the local homeless shelter, each day. We have 2 locations for dinner, and we actually vend lunches for 18 Head Start classrooms each day. So we really focus primarily our outreach efforts on children and seniors and the chronically ill, because those are members among our population who are the most vulnerable and often have the most difficulty accessing the nutrition they need on their own. So that's what we focus on, but we are there 6 days a week to anyone in need. When they need to come eat with us, we don't ask questions. They can come, they can have a meal, they can take a carry-out meal with them if they need to. They come to our main facility where we have a dining room, they can eat seconds, thirds, they can eat till they're full. And so a lot of our folks in our main facility are both seniors or folks experiencing homelessness. Last year, I will tell you my brief numbers, we served 314,911 meals and snacks. 72% of the people we served were kids, 10% were seniors, and 12% had experienced homelessness sometime in the previous 6 months, to us asking them their situation. So we really are there for anyone, but we really want to focus on those more vulnerable populations, and that's where we focus our outreach efforts.
I'm Brandon Schurr, and I work with the Division of Student Affairs. And about a year ago, maybe in February, our office took over Crimson Cupboard. So Crimson Cupboard started as a student organization about 5 years ago with the student as their capstone project. And it kind of stayed. If you're familiar with student organizations or a part of them, they can be really great when you have excited students, but then as they graduate on, it's hard to keep that steam. So something with like a food pantry was really hard to get those same excited students, especially a student organization that included opening twice a week, to have that consistent volunteers. So the Division of Student Affairs took it on last year, which was able to give it some staffing. So graduate students, 2 graduate students from SPIA work part-time, myself oversee it, and have about 20 or 30 student volunteers also. The great thing about Crimson Cupboard is it tends to be the main resource center for this population, 47,000, 48,000 students. So as much as we think that Bloomington is small and think that it's not separate, a lot of times students will not venture off of campus for different resources or know where to go. So we tend to be that first place where students go when they're experiencing food insecurity. The best study that's really come out around college food insecurity, which there's not a lot of good ones in the future, we should have, I think next year they're going to start to try and study and get reports from students on all campuses nationally. But the best sense that they have is at least in four-year colleges, at least 30 to 35% of students on campus are struggling with food insecurity. So if we think about our campus here, we're talking around 14,000, 15,000 students that don't know where their next meal is coming from, don't know how to pay for things like food and groceries and bills. And the issue with that is for a lot of these students, it's maybe their first time experiencing food insecurity, so don't know where to go, don't know what to do, never experienced that. So Crimson Cupboard, really, a lot of our efforts are outreach to students to let them know that this is a place they can go to. And the great thing about having great community partners is we can then send them out to get more and more resources that we might not be able to provide for them. And also the knowledge that they have given us has been helpful too. We have a great relationship with a lot of nonprofits in the community, but with Hoosier Hills Food Bank, we shop there every week, and the students get to go and shop there and have that experience. So Crimson Cupboard is open 5 days a week. We try to open different days at different times because of students' schedules. And we, even though, again, we are small in a lot of ways, our physical space is maybe like, I don't know what your closet sizes are like. That's a big closet. And so it's a great place for them to come, but our whole idea is to let them know that this isn't their only resource, that they can get many other resources as well. The University, the Division of Student Affairs, is also starting to roll out giving people meal points in different forms so that folks that don't necessarily have a kitchen and can't come and get food that they can cook, but need a couple meals just to get through the semester. Like all of us probably know, April and the end of the semester that month is when a lot of students experience it for the first time, running out of meal points and running out of different ways to get food. I also work with, if any of you, the agencies that are here have Cox Scholars, I work with Cox Civic Scholars, and we have one at Community Kitchen and 3 at Hoosier Hills. And they've been a great resource to encourage students not only to volunteer in the community around food insecurity, but also to let them know where those resources are. And also, I play a role in the school board as well, and whenever those issues come up, the Monroe County School Corporation has done a great job recently on having a fund for, if you know about the fund or have donated to the fund, for the foundation, the Monroe County Community Foundation Food Assistance Fund. So it's been a great fund to make sure that no kids go without school lunch.
All right. Can people hear me if I don't use the microphone? Okay, so that might be a little bit easier. So that, no one's ever told me I was too loud before, or too quiet before. So I want to start. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions just to get this conversation started, and then we will open it up to questions from the audience because I know that there are a lot out there. But I want to start with something that's actually very basic because we hear the words food security, food insecurity quite often. So can you tell me how you define food insecurity and how is it different than hunger?
I guess I've got the microphone. Food insecurity, it's essentially a government term, but the definition is essentially a lack of access to nutritious food on a regular basis. It's a little bit oversimplified, but it's more about access to food because for many years, hunger is the term that was used to describe what we're talking about. But hunger is actually something, it's more of a personal feeling one has that you can't necessarily measure. The government likes to measure things. And food insecurity is more about access to nutritious food on a regular basis. So the government does do a study every year that establishes food insecurity, that asks questions about food insecurity and access to food on a regular basis. Feeding America, the national organization that we're affiliated with, does a study called Map the Meal Gap that boils food insecurity rates down to the county level and is based on that government survey. And what it does essentially mean is, did you or your family at any time during the past year not have access to good nutritious food? So it's a little bit more measurable than were you hungry at any particular time last year.
That's great.
I think the only piece that I would add that always struck me in that definition is the last part is receiving it in socially acceptable ways. And I think for me that's something that always strikes me is you can give people food, but the socially acceptable way, like how are we providing and giving food to people?
So I had the chance to take a look at the Feed America map and looked at Monroe County and saw that in Indiana we had what they call this food insecurity rate of 16%, which actually seems pretty high compared to other counties in Indiana. So what does that mean if we have a food insecurity rate of 16%? What does that mean in the lives of people who are living here in Bloomington and Monroe County?
Well, it means, so first of all, the food insecurity rate for our 6-county service area is also 16%, and it is higher than both the state and national averages, slightly. What it means is that there are about 38,000 people, including close to 9,000 children, who are at risk of hunger, who don't necessarily have access to nutritious food on a regular basis in socially acceptable ways. Doesn't necessarily mean all of those people are going hungry every day, but it means they are struggling to keep nutritious food on their tables. And that's a serious problem, and that's the one that we're trying to address. The one thing I will say that's somewhat good is that rate has been declining for the past few years, just by small amounts, fraction of a percentage, but nonetheless it's gone down about 12% from 2012 to 2017, and the Feeding America map, by necessity, these figures are a couple of years behind because they have to do the surveys, they have to publish the information and everything. So the 2019 information we have is really for 2017, but between 2012 and 2017 went down about 12%. Interestingly, our distribution went up 33% during that same period, and frankly, I think that's part of the reason. We're providing more food in more different ways to people and making these nutritious foods accessible to them. So I think there's a correlation there.
So one of the things, all of you who work directly, with people who are facing food insecurity, and we're so blessed to be able to have so many organizations in our community be able to do the work that you guys are doing, but we also have to recognize that it's tragic that we actually need so many people to be able to do the work it is that we're doing. So when you're actually face to face with people who are facing food insecurity, that this is part of their regular lives, what are some of maybe the misconceptions that some of us might have for people who are facing this as part of their day-to-day reality?
One of the typical misconceptions is that folks who are experiencing food insecurity, and we see this more broadly with poverty, but are people who have just made bad decisions, who are, what people always assume about folks who come to the kitchen in particular is that they're homeless and addicts. And that's not the case. Folks who are experiencing homelessness and folks who have substance abuse issues are also people, and they have a right to eat, but that's not also the predominant number of people that we see. And so we see folks who, one of the things that is continually striking for me, even after 15 years of doing this and 8 years before that in pantry world, is just how grateful people are. Like just how grateful they are, not only for the food, but just for the positive human interaction. Because, if we think about the folks we see walking up and down the streets, or we know are living in the woods behind, X place or whatever, they're not treated very well. And so oftentimes by the rest of our community, they're looked down on or ignored or even worse, just treated badly. And so for us, one of the things, being the place where people actually come in and interact with our volunteers and get food and sit down and have a meal and a conversation, one of the things that is always striking is that even in the midst of whatever kind of really crappy day they've had, or even longer time than a day, they're very grateful, and they're very gracious most of the time. One of the things that struck me years ago was just how generous a lot of our folks are with one another. While I'm not a proponent of smoking, it's not good for you, don't do it. It's always been amazing to me how folks who are really down on their luck will share a cigarette with somebody. Those things are expensive. But it's, and maybe that's not necessarily the best example to use, but it's this idea that, oftentimes that folks have, that people who are using services like ours are users. They're out for what they can get all the time, and it's striking for me how generous those folks are with one another, and just with themselves, with us, and with our volunteers as well. And so that's really the thing for me. They don't all fit a mold.
I would say, and I'm guilty of this as well, I was living in Bloomington for a while, and you see these huge apartments go up all around town, and it creates almost this divide between us and them as these rich, privileged university students versus us in this town. And I think sometimes we tend to put all university students in sort of a box or a nice penthouse. And I think what I've realized in this experience of working with Crimson Cupboard is that is not the majority of students' experience. The majority of student experience is struggling still to get through college, even with full ride scholarships. So I work with a lot of full ride scholarships. I think we think that means something that it doesn't. That just because you can get here doesn't mean that you can continue to feed yourself, continue to not work a job, 2-3 jobs. So I think as I've worked at Crimson Cupboard and seen people going, that mentality of students are rich and privileged, and they're rising our costs of housing and all these things, and as much as they're almost like a hated necessity sometimes by a lot of folks in town. I think we need to realize that there's a huge population of university students. If you want to think even like 14, 15,000 of them that are just struggling to get by, that are doing all they can. Just to even get to college was a huge, huge jump for them, and for them to stay. Students who are experiencing food insecurity at university are like 3.5 times more likely to drop out of college, start missing classes because they haven't eaten, and then that sort of creates this whole cycle. A lot of scholarship students that I work with, when they get the scholarship, they have the most money in their family. So if all of us here think about our family, and we now are the biggest earner, and our mom or our dad needs to pay rent or needs to pay cable back home, we will dip into that, most likely into that scholarship money. So now we don't have any extra for food or anything beyond just paying for school. So I think that's the biggest thing, is the misconception that about university students. So I hope that all of us, and you can come visit Crimson Cupboard, but just sort of realize there is this sort of hidden sort of group of university students that are really struggling to get by, and this going through university and us supporting them with one issue can help them graduate and sort of move on and change their lives in a lot of ways.
So at this point, I want to turn over to the audience because I know that there's going to be a lot of questions. I'd love to be able to have a nice back and forth of conversation going on here. Keep in mind, I want to make a regular reminder that this is a time to ask questions, not make statements, or give speeches. There are times and places for that. But I see this is a lovely group here, so Mary.
Could you talk a little bit about your funding sources? I'm also interested in the kind of support that you get, particularly from the local government. And are there any policy changes or financial support that you would like to see that would help address these issues?
So our funding is almost all community funding, in the sense of individual donors, congregations, civic clubs, local, both city and county government. We do get some meal reimbursement for some of our kids programs, and that's funding that's eventually USDA funding that it's filtered through the state. Sometimes it's filtered through the state and then through a local board, but it's all from out there. And that's for our summer food program and for our after-school meals and snacks for kids in particular. We are paid. We are a vendor for Head Start, and so the Head Start meals that we do are paid through the Head Start grant from South Central Community Action Program through their grant there. But most of our funding is here local, and so we get funding. I shouldn't say every year, but every year that I've been in the kitchen, we've gotten funding from the county specifically for food, and we go to the city both on the CDBG side, so we'll get community development block grant funds specifically just for providing meals. So we've been able to get that, and then we most always participate in the Jack Hawkins Social Service Fund at the city, where we can get one-time expenditure grants, usually for equipment for us. So those are the big things for us. Of course, anytime, we're always concerned about CDBG going away or the neighborhood assistance program, tax credit program at the state going away. But I feel like for us, one of the funding formulas that most affects us is food stamps. And that's obviously not money that we're getting, but when requirements for those change or when funding levels change, then we see our needs rise. And so we have more people in the door and we have more food to provide. And so that's when, those are the policy changes that have been have made the most impact on us in the years that I've been there, are those changes that actually are happening at the client level instead of at the agency level.
Actually, the biggest source of donations we have are food donations, and that the cash budget that we have leverages about over $7 million worth of quote-unquote free food donated to us that we can then disperse out into the community. But in terms of financial support, the vast majority of our support comes from private sources that we have essentially fundraised for through events, through direct mail, through all of the the good sort of things that agencies do to raise money and receive contributions in the community. We do receive a fair amount of government support as well. The largest source of that is reimbursement that we receive from the U.S. Department of Agriculture for administering 2 federal commodity programs in our 6 counties. That money does not fully cover the cost of implementing those programs, but they each also come with the food that we distribute. So it's an incredibly important source of both for us. We also get a lot of support from local government, the Jack Hopkins Fund, Sophia Travis Fund, Perry Township, and Buren Township always been very supportive of us. And United Way membership, of course, provides us with a monthly check that's been raised from donors out in the community. Apply for grants everywhere that we can get them. And about 20% of the food we distribute to our agencies carries what's called a shared maintenance contribution of 19 cents per pound. That applies generally to the food that is either we've purchased or is more difficult for us to obtain logistically, so the agencies help support us with that. The one thing I guess I will say, if I'm allowed to make speeches, it brings up a little pet peeve of mine. Many of the wonderful funding sources that support us will only do so for certain specific projects and types of things. What is incredibly difficult for us is to find money to support our general operating needs, to keep the doors open every day. We have to pay the light bill. We have to put fuel in the truck. We have to pay our staff a living wage. We have to do all of those things. And no one really wants to fund those things. They all want innovative solutions that are going to end the problem. We can't always provide that. We need the money every day to keep the doors open. And that's where those generous people out in the community come in, because that's what we use most of that support for.
Crimson Cupboard's funding mostly comes from the University Division of Student Affairs and also through private funders and donations. And then we're really able to stay around because of Hoosier Hills Food Bank. The partnership between Hoosier Hills Food Bank and Crimson Cupboard is invaluable. So really, we wouldn't be able to. The Crimson Cupboard Food Pantry has probably quadrupled in size and amount of food because of the partnership that we have with Hoosier Hills and the great, amazing food. So thank you.
Question for you all, and perhaps those in the audience as well. We hear so much divided, hateful speech today that has become partisan. And food insecurity is a nonpartisan issue, or it should be. How do you make people see that at the local level, the economy is not great, and your agencies are seeing more than 100% increase in clients? It's a serious question because people in Washington are not listening to this, yet they may be willing to cut food stamps further.
You know, one of the things that makes my job a little easier is the percentage of children that we serve, and seniors, and folks who are experiencing homelessness, like I mentioned. And so that's one of the ways that my job is probably easier than theirs, in the sense that I don't have to talk about people in general. I can almost, with certain populations of folks, not even talk about adults. I can just talk about kids. And kids still seem to be where we cut through and can be completely bipartisan. So that's really maybe the lazy person's approach, but that's really been my approach with it, because we're in this situation where that really works well for us. And you know, just to be really honest, it obviously tugs at your heartstrings a little more when I talk about a 6-year-old who's hungry than when I talk about a 36-year-old who's hungry. And so it works very well for us, but we're obviously a little different than these guys.
I don't like being in the middle.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, Valerie. It's very difficult for us to get that message out because people look and say, well, the economy's doing well, things have improved. You know, why? Why do you still need so much? Why are there still so many people accessing your services? And the fact of the matter is, low unemployment does not equal prosperity anymore. I mean, maybe it did at one time, but not today. The primary problem is wage levels. People are working and not making enough money to sustain themselves. That's why they've come to rely more regularly on what used to be an emergency food assistance network, but is now a supplemental food assistance network. We have essentially seen that since the Great Recession in 2008. Our numbers went through the roof around that time, and they haven't come down. They're not, I wouldn't say they're really spiking significantly more, but they've stayed pretty steady. That need has continued because people have come to rely on these sources. And what's unfortunate is that, you look at those low unemployment numbers, and you get into what Vicki was talking about, where people start saying, well, there are jobs out there that, these people just don't want to work. They don't, or, they're working, they shouldn't need SNAP benefits anymore. And you start to pull the rug out from under people who are already on the margins and just trying to get by in order to save some money in the budget, and it continues a downward spiral for a lot of people. So we need to be reinvesting in some of these programs that support people as opposed to eliminating or reducing them.
I think one example to put my school board hat on for a second is that Vicki said, I think a couple of years ago, Monroe County School District, and the idea of possible lunch shaming and just the community with any kids experiencing hunger denied or exchanged a different meal. I think the community, including some agencies as well, came out to sort of support that. So I think it kind of cut through any sort of political divide, and especially when kids were involved. I think with the university, I think I've learned to speak university speak. So education, if it affects education, if it affects retention, a lot of people really hear those terms maybe than other things. So, and for a lot of parents, I'm speaking to a parents advisory board this week, and for a lot of parents who their students do not experience that, it's the first time that they've ever even heard about. It's kind of the first circle that their students have been in where students have faced food insecurity. So that's been interesting to, in Bloomington, I feel like anytime I talk about it, most people know more than I do about it, or at least know people who are struggling with that. But in the university sense, or at least the parents, that their students go, a lot of times that's their first place that they've even heard about students struggling, and it sort of tugs on their heartstrings in a lot of ways because they can't imagine their student having to worry or think about those things. So.
No, you're over.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
My question was actually about partnerships, and everything you were saying about employment really ties to that. So I'm with the Bloomington Economic Development Corporation, and our mission is to create quality jobs across Monroe County. I just came back from a national conference where all of our peer and sister organizations across the U.S. are talking about similar things. When we say prosperity for who, jobs for who, and there's so many compounding factors. So my question is, if we're trying to get at some of the root causes, what partnerships do you see as possible and as needed across the community to connect some of these dots to be rowing in the same direction so that we can be addressing these issues?
Well, all right, I'll take a stab at it. That's a very good question. I'll say first that among us and among the nonprofits, the social service agencies working in the partnerships and collaborations are absolutely essential, and I think we do a pretty good job of that here in Monroe County. I don't know if we're better than other places or not, but we do a pretty good job of collaborating. The whole basis of our existence at the food bank is that collaboration. We work very hard not to duplicate what our partner agencies are doing, but rather to support them in what they're doing by trying to provide them with food. So I think we try to work effectively and efficiently together as much as possible. I don't have an exact answer for you, but I think more awareness of the situation is important, and I think more interaction in any way possible between organizations like ours and organizations like yours, for example. I don't know what specifically to propose today, but for us to be at the same table and in the same room discussing things, I think would be helpful. I think there are a lot of opportunities for that kind of collaboration, and I think if we can do what we can do legally and appropriately in terms of advocating with government for what's needed, I think that helps. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
And we stared at each other a long time because I feel like that's, I don't say this often, but I feel like that's sort of above my pay grade. In the sense that, one of the things we often talk about at the kitchen is that the issue we see is very much not unemployment, it's very much underemployment. And that is part of just the nature of being a university town, right? There's a whole lot of energy and bodies, and so there's always somebody who will do that job for less. So I'm not really sure what those partnerships are that solve that problem, but I think that's really sort of at the crux of why we're all here, because a lot of the people that we see really are working, and some of them are working 2 jobs. I make good money and I work 2 jobs, because when you have to support other people, that gets really expensive, and if you want quality of life for those other people, it gets even more expensive. So that's why I stared so perplexed for a while. You have nothing. Brandon has nothing. He's going to be able to make it up.
I have a question maybe related to that. And I know that the school corporation provides leftover food to the agencies. Are you able to get food from restaurants, leftover food from community restaurants?
He's the keeper of the food.
The answer is yes, we are. We have a program called Meal Share that's a prepared food rescue program. The MCCSC is one of our top 2 or 3 donors every year, along with a lot of organizations on campus, the Hoosier Room, the Tudor Room, and restaurants within the community as well. It's a very small portion, maybe 2%-ish of the total food that we collect and distribute, but a very important one because it's usually good, nutritious food. Unfortunately, it's a very expensive undertaking that a lot of food banks no longer do because, first of all, it's highly regulated. Food safety is paramount for us. A lot of people don't realize that. We are subject to the same regulation and inspection that any for-profit food distribution organization is. That food in particular has to be handled properly, temped at every stage, recorded, transported properly, all of that good stuff. We repack it with volunteers 3 nights a week, freeze it, and then distribute it to agencies. So it's a very good and very important source of food for us, but it's probably one of the more expensive and labor-intensive methods of collecting food for us.
And I will add to that, they don't repack all of that meal share food because they also stop by the kitchen, and we get a lot of that. And so that prepared food is very effective for us because in addition to the warm food that we serve for dinner at both locations, we have cold carryouts ready to go. And so primarily that's what's in there. If we had leftovers from our own food the day before, that will be in there as well because it's been handled and cooled properly. But a lot of that meal share food, that's exactly what we do with it. It goes out in carryouts directly to folks where they're going, and so that's important. We will occasionally get food directly from restaurants, and we will occasionally get food directly from MCCSC. That tends to be if, right before break, so right before winter break and right before spring break and right before the end of the year, if they're closing down the kitchen, and they haven't made connections with them, sometimes they'll bring us food directly as well, and we greatly appreciate that. Serving a lot of kids, when the kid food comes in, it's already, the milks are in half pints, and and there's juice and there's fruit that's already dished up and ready to go. That's great for us.
I was going to say, in this topic, it's always great just to point to Hoosier Hills Food Bank, because a lot of university students have a lot of great ideas. And one of them that's always like, why aren't you, I was just at an event and all this food was wasted. And I can just say, you should talk to Hoosier Hills Food Bank. I send them to Brandon. Because I think I will give them a little bit of information, but I think that when we see food waste, a lot of times we think like, there's so much food, why don't we just package it? And learning from the food bank, it's not that easy. So it's been really interesting, especially because that's something that comes up with students all the time. There's actually a student org that has been created kind of on that basis as well, and it's a hard endeavor. So.
Well, then what about that same question for grocery stores?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. That's the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of our business. We're at every Walmart in our service area, every Kroger. We go to Blooming Foods. We're going to Lucky's. All of those partners are incredibly valuable to us in being able to provide the amount of food that we do. Again, it's just something people don't realize is a very labor-intensive. It takes a lot of effort to do that. It takes just not only the refrigerated trucks and the trained staff and everything, but a lot of relationship management. Brandon over here is our manager of food sourcing. He has to maintain relationships with not just store managers in every one of those stores, but the produce manager, the meat manager, the bakery manager. We have to keep those people engaged in wanting to contribute because truthfully, it's something extra that they have to do. Whether fortunately, we get a lot of corporate support where it comes down from the top that hey, we're doing this, we're committed to supporting the food bank and to supporting hunger relief, but it really comes down to those individuals in each store buying into that, and that's one of the things we have to do is work those relationships and let those people know the impact of what they're having. But it's probably the most important thing that we do is that regular retail route that we run every day, collecting from all of those stores.
All right, I think we probably have time for about 1 minute.
Something that I'm interested in is stigma around food choice. So that is around choices that individuals make about what they eat, and that it's important for everyone to have the dignity of choice. And I wonder if you would talk about your experiences in your work with that issue, and any efforts here or elsewhere that you know that are making a difference around that.
So one of the things that actually, I don't know if you did this or if it was even predated you, but one of the things that's always been true the whole time that I've been at the kitchen is that we have vegetarian option every day. Our kitchen supervisor has gone back. He was previously vegetarian and then he wasn't. And he's gone back to being vegetarian, so now every Friday is Vegetarian Friday. I realize there are a lot of food choices, not just vegetarian, but one of the things that our staff, I think, does really well is not only having a good vegetarian option, oftentimes it will be vegan as well, and just being really intent about not asking someone why. There have been rare occasions where the vegetarian item is so good and in such a limited quantity that they've asked people, please don't take this if you're not vegetarian, because they needed to make sure that everybody who is really got their chance. But just, for us, sort of feeding the masses, it really is, we try to be as healthy as we can and pay as much attention to, you know, levels of spice and, you know, and fairly low sodium and, you know, sort of real healthy, but also bulking the calories because we know a lot of folks are on foot. So, you know, we do our best to accommodate that. Obviously, just random food choices, honestly, is, you know, we can't do that because we're not cooking to order. But they do, our staff really do a good job of when they hear something in particular from people really trying to take that into account. So that's really sort of limited what we've been able to do. I guess that's it.
I worked at Hubbard's Cupboard for a couple years back, and so they've heavily influenced me in all of my areas around, especially around food insecurity. So when I came into Crimson Cupboard and was able to play a role, I just copied what they do because they do it so well. As far as the pantry wise, like a store, essentially, people they very low barrier and can get what they want. And because of our relationship with Hoosier Hills Food Bank, they always have great options like tofu, lentils, like just soy milk, different things. So we tend to grab a lot of meatless things for folks and then just a lot of other things. But people have the choice to take what they want, what they don't. Someone might come in and take 2 things, someone might take 8 things, and give them an opportunity to know, kind of this idea of they know best what they want and what they need, and we just stay out of the way and say hi and say bye when they leave.
This is a very good question because it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine. For us, it's difficult to provide a lot of choice because we rely almost entirely on donations. So we take what we get and we distribute that out to people, the good with the quote-unquote bad. We try to offer as much on the positive end of the spectrum and giving people choice with low sodium, with meat alternatives, with fresh produce and that sort of thing. We also get a lot of stuff on the other end of the spectrum: snacks, chips, cakes, soda, things like that. First of all, any of our pantries that participate in the government TFAP program, the commodity program, must be client choice in order to do that. So they have to allow clients to go through and choose. They can't do pre-bagged or pre-boxed groceries, determining what the client should receive. We don't require that of our other non-government program pantries, but we very strongly encourage that, and we provide incentives for them to do that because we believe that's the right way to do it. I'm a strong believer that just because people are coming to a food pantry or a kitchen doesn't mean you should take away the options from them that other people have. I go to Kroger and I get to choose whether I'm going to buy potato chips this week or not. If we've got potato chips available, I'm not sending them to a landfill. I'm going to give them to a pantry to let people choose whether they want that or not. They should have that option. We can do a lot of educational efforts about health and healthy eating and diabetes and all of that stuff, and we should, but we should not take those choices out of people in a parental way, thinking that we know better and we know what they should have and shouldn't have.
So I think I just wanted to follow up maybe a little bit on that, and I think you got to the question, which is the reason why students are having trouble eating that they are spending their money on junk food and fast food restaurants. And I think that that's the stigma that I think there might be in how people think about people who, and I think you started off by saying, you know, there's a sense that people are making bad choices, and then that's why they're in the situation. So, doing education with the clients you have, but what else is there? And I think you're focused on the importance of choice and that people should have the opportunity to make the choices, and it is an important element. But I'm just wondering about the stigma question, because I think it really is an important one.
For the students that come in the pantry, that's not the experience that I have. So how we can get rid of the stigma from the outside, I'm not really that concerned about, because I know that the students that come in, that's not something that they're not deciding between, it's not because they went out to fast food for 6 times and now they're ending, they ran out of money. It's more because they have 3 jobs and have roommates that they're trying to provide for as well, and lots of other things. So I'm more concerned just building relationships and getting food to people, and I'm not too concerned about the stigma that's on the outside.
One of the things that has always sort of felt true to me is that stigma, that judgment about someone is in this position because whatever, is really not about them, it's about me. It's about me wanting to feel like I made a good decision, and because they probably made a bad decision, then that's not my responsibility. And so, all we can do on our, not all we can do, one of the things that we focus most on our end is just educating when we get an opportunity about the people that we see, and about they're not what most people would assume that they are, who those folks would assume they are, that that they're children, they're seniors, they're people who are working multiple jobs, but rent in Bloomington is high and they can't get ahead, or they're starting to make a headway and it looks like maybe we might be able to take this next step, and then the car breaks down, and you're not on the bus line, or even if you are, that's a horrible nightmare to try to maneuver. And so it's for most of our folks, it really is 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And so anytime we can help, and unfortunately those conversations tend to be one-on-1 or 1-on-5. You can't educate everybody really quickly, but that for me is really where that stigma comes from. It's really about sort of trying to absolve myself of any responsibility here whatsoever.
All right, thank you so much, and thank you all of you, Brandon, Vicki, and Julio, for all the wonderful work that you do for our community. We'll want to close out by just saying that next month we are going to continue on with the speaker series on March 12th, and the issue will be creating a brain injury friendly community. We'll have both service providers as well as individuals with brain injuries who will be there. You'll see you've got surveys, so tell us anything that you want to hear, any insights that you might have. We'd love to be able to hear from you. You'll also see that we've got some resource sheets over here. We've got the contact information for lawmakers. I just saw 2 of our 2 esteemed county council members walk out the door, so so you won't have a chance to tell them what you think right now, but you've got their contact information, so you'll have a chance to be able to tell them what you think eventually. And so then also you'll see on the back wall here we have a couple of questions about food insecurity and what it means to you. And so take a moment while we're sitting down, having our coffee, finishing off the rest of the food that we have here, because we know it's not too easy just to pawn off to an organization. We want you to be able to finish that, enjoy some company, enjoy some conversations, and write some reflections on the wall. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being part of this important community conversation, and we'll see you next month.